Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Heroes Table. Just real quick before we start, I just want to mention that I had to redo my setup between last episode and this one because I had to reinstall my computer. So if there's anything wrong with anything, please let us know in the chat as fast as possible so we can resolve it as fast as possible. Awesome. Yes, as usual, I'm Hisha, your host, and together with me, my co-host, Saluvius Midnight, and this time we have a special guest host, Dirk, as well. You guys can introduce yourselves.
Hey, everybody.
How's it going?
Well, hello.
All right, so Dirk, you can use some time to introduce yourself properly, since it's the first time we see you on the show. And welcome.
Yeah, well, thank you, Hisha. I am Dirk Manjaw the 7th. Why the 7th? I don't know, but because. So I've been around. I was around Augury right around the start of its launch, and I don't know why I stuck around. I just stuck around because I had a lot of fun. They released some cool products that I really was interested in. Then they started talking about doing a game. I was like, I want to do a game. I like games. I also have lots of experience gaming and actually doing D&D and DMing D&D. So I was like, yeah, that sounds really fun. Also, my general background is a lot of business consulting and things of that nature. So I was like, okay, so I actually get to work on doing writing for the game and like the game creation. All of this is like a dream come true, and I don't have to be the one doing 90% of the work. That sounds fantastic. So, yeah, that's why I'm here. I'm here to have a lot of fun and see what it's like to launch one of these games and have a lot of fun doing it.
Awesome.
Right on.
All right, let's quickly go through the agenda before we get to the exciting stuff. So we just did introductions. Today's topic will be the Druid, and the reason Dirk is here on the show today is because he will be the one presenting this topic today. And as usual, we will end by having a Q&A. And as usual, you guys can put your questions in the chat already, and we will answer them if they are relevant throughout the stream. We will take some time to answer them if there's a natural break. Otherwise, we will collect them all and answer them during the Q&A part of the stream. And yeah, but just ask away throughout the stream. You don't have to wait. The faster you can get your questions out, we know that there are questions when we get that far. Excellent. So yeah, I'll pass it over to you, Dirk, and you can present our druids.
Yeah, so right before I get into the story, I'm sure it's been explained before, but when it came to creating characters, it was pretty much a free for all. Whoever picked whatever first was how it worked, and I, in general, with some of the stuff I'm juggling, was a little slower on the draw. So some of the things that I originally would have considered writing, I was like, oh, hey, Midnight's taking like 3/4 of this. And then, but I mean, he's nice. He gave up one or two. But more realistically, as I kind of worked through them, there's a time in your life when characters that you originally thought like, I've never really been much of a druid player in like D&D or things of that nature. But when you come from a story writing perspective and think about, well, who do I actually get to write behind this character, and what's going on? Why are they here? What's making all of this interesting? It starts to become stuff you're not familiar with starts to become way more interesting to explore. And I think that's why the druids, as we'll see, are an interesting piece for me, because it wasn't really stories that I had thought of with doing my own campaign work or in any of the fantasy I had done. It was just, how do we think about characters in this situation, in this area? Why are they here? What's their interests? And that's why it really became an interesting write for me, is really figuring out, okay, in this crazy situation we have in eternity with the war that's going on, everything else, why are these druids here? So yeah, that's kind of a little bit of the background why I ended up picking druid, and I guess I'm going to read you a little story now. So here we go. When young Vincent's mother told him not to go gallivanting off with the king's militia, he promptly ignored her, just like any teenager would. He wouldn't sit by and let the orcs have free rein over his island. So he went, pulled out his old grandfather's blade, and met with a few of the village folk that were like-minded with him. They got up before dawn, and they started towards near Demise, where the orcs' horde skirmishers were last spotted. They met up with the king's forces and were wrapped up into a unit of other men, some like him, villagers eager to defend their homes. Others had more experience. Vincent listened to their stories around the fire with eager eyes and a happy heart. It was his time to be a hero. He'd be home soon with an orc hide, a sack full of gold for his family, and a story to steal any girl's heart. A little while later, things were not going quite as planned. After watching the first wave of the Mad King's forces plow through the militia, Vincent's hope of becoming a hero were quickly dashed. The only swing he got in on an orc was essentially shattering his grandfather's sword on its head. The next thing he knew, a spear sliced his leg open. The pain sent him reeling. And immediately he fled from the front lines in defiance of the officer's shout. The militia, it scattered around him, and those stupid enough to stay and try and fight were quickly run down. Vincent had lived off the wilds before. He could go it alone. He fled into the forest, the hopes that he could fix up his leg. But as he tried to bind some wraps around it, the orcish warpack would not relent. The shouts and roars of his pursuers drove him onward. Vincent hobbled into a glade overgrown with impasse thickets. It stretched off in both directions, cupping the clearing he stood in. For him to have any hope of getting out, he had to double back a quarter mile to get around it. Realizing he was trapped, he fell to his knees, closed his eyes, and waited for his impending doom. Surprisingly, the orcish battle cries that were slowly closing in on him shifted. No longer did he hear a bloodthirsting howl, but he heard confused yells and shouts. Vincent heard the groan of trees snapping, shifting, like something huge was moving through the woods. Animal cries were everywhere. Neighing mooses, a bear's roar, and even a wolf's howling. A swarm of locusts erupted from the thicket and washed over him, leaving him shaken, but surprisingly untouched. Vincent took the moment of reprieve to tear his shirt and wrap his injury. He started back to try and get around the thicket, but it wasn't long till he found a pile of orc corpses. He saw figures standing around them that he could not make out well due to it being dusk. He thought to himself, I need to get out of here. Immediately, just after thinking that, a deep growl rumbled from beside him. Vincent slowly turned to see this massive creature, some freakish cross between a wolf and a man, glaring down at him. He had heard tales of such beastmen. He quickly realized that this would-be hero might be much more terrifying than the orcs he had fought, and that the stories of these beastmen were indeed worse than he had ever heard. Leaning in, this creature slowly said to him, Give me a reason not to add you to the pile of corpses over there. Vincent's blood left his face. He had thought he had met his doom. Yet, a voice within the leaves on the other side broke the tension. Roma, he's barely older than a child. What threat do you think he could pose? The branches and the trunk of trees of the thicket parted. A beautiful woman dressed in animal skins stepped out of the cover. Long antlers jutted from her hair. "He was foolish enough to lead the orcs to where we live, Aveline," the wolfman snarled in Vincent's face. "Better not take the chances of him bringing more problems in the future." Aveline smiled at both of them. "I doubt it, brother. After seeing how you tore through our real enemy, I'm sure this young one has little interest in revisiting the glade. Isn't that right?" Vincent nodded so fast that he felt like his head might pop off. Roma huffed. His warm breath brushed the back of Vincent's neck. He rolled his shoulders back and stalked away. Afterwards, Aveline kneeled down and looked Vincent square in the eyes. "You can go home now, but remember this. The Forest will protect those who are innocent, but anyone who trespasses with ill will shall know the ferocity of the Druids." She pointed, and a different part of the overgrowth unwound, revealing a path out of the forest. Vincent immediately ran for his life, like be damned. He heard her chuckling in the distance. He found the road before dark and soon realized he was on his way home. Amid the chaos of the day, the orcs, the druids, all of it, he realized that his mother probably did know best in this situation, and that there were much better suited people to defend the island. One thing was certain. He sure had a heck of a story to tell. Back in the glade, a few moments later, you hear a rustle in a voice. "Ferocity of the Druids, huh?" Danuge chuckled as she stepped out of the forest with her feline companion by her side and watched the boy run off. She looked at Aveline and smiled. Aveline smiled back. Roma did not look amused at the least. Eldred popped out of the woods a moment later and does a "Scaring children, eh, Roma?" Roma started to growl. "Do not forget that you are guests here." Danuge interrupted. "We are here because of the Valkyrie, so that we can continue. Can we continue our conversation now that we had to halt to deal with these annoying orcs?" "Of course, Ranger," said Evelyn calmly. "Let's go talk now." "Come on, Roma," she waves, and they walk off into the distance together to face their next foe. And that's it.
Yay.
Very nice.
Awesome.
Very good.
All right. So before we move on to the questions here from our other hosts, can we just get a 10,000-foot view of what happened here in this scenario? Like where do the druids find themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. So some of this is going to come out later, I think, because I think a good storyteller doesn't necessarily figure out all the pieces immediately. But
Definitely.
they start setting up strings and patterns depending on how the world comes about and how it comes alive. But in the back of my mind when I was writing this, the druids clearly are someone else. They're someone other. There's obviously inhabitants in the town, or there's inhabitants in the town. There's inhabitants all across everywhere else, and yet the druids have chosen to make their home in the forest, separated from anyone else that they could be with. So there's a bit of otherness that's there, and some of it's probably to do with how they interact with the world. Some of it has to do with probably how they view people like Vincent, and just a few other things like that. So here they are, protecting the glade, protecting the woods, and in comes this town dweller who's clearly stirred up a hornet's nest of orcs, and the orcs come in. Now, from their point of view, this there's no way Vincent's going to really harm a fly, let alone anyone in the forest. But they've dealt with orcs. They've dealt with things that could harm them before. So much like nature, is very unforgiving in some senses. They were very unforgiving in their assessment of why the orcs were there. It took no time to bury them. So yeah, I think from the overall 10,000 foot view, it's really this group of people. They live in the wild. They embrace nature as its whole. They live in a way where they can be merciful when they see fit, but for the most part, if they see anything or anyone acting in a way that is, um, I won't even just say unrighteous, but threatening, they're just not going to tolerate it. It's survival of the fittest to them. So, so yeah, I think that's the interesting play that's going on with the druid and with kind of the glade and the group of the people who are in the forest dwelling. They've chosen to live there for a reason. That reason very much cuts against what normal society would focus on and the virtues and the things of that nature. But there's still virtue there that we all can get behind. So that's a lot of rambling and a lot of 10,000 foot view for you.
Sounds good. All right, let's get some questions.
Yeah, so it was a great reading. It's a great story. I love the introduction of characters, like you said, without giving everything away. Sort of adds a lot of space to build and create there, and I like that. I like that a lot. Um, so we have the druids and we have the warrior and the ranger all in this story. So how do the ranger and the warrior, in your mind, sort of connect to the druids? Is it the same forest that the ranger lives in that the warrior fled into when he met the ranger? Is it a separate forest? Is it, sort of how do those stories mesh in your mind?
Yeah, I haven't quite answered it. I was fine with the mystery of it in the sense that the ranger clearly is home in the forest.
Hmm.
And, you know, I don't really think that she's necessarily home in a forest. She's nomadic in nature. So
Hmm.
having her there clearly made sense. I mean,
Yeah.
clearly made sense that she has contacts and she's not hampered by just living in one spot. She's very nomadic, things of that. Um, I think the question, I know it was a conversation a long time ago, but I think it was a joke that ran between Tal and I about how the warrior and the ranger originally got intro together. And I kind of want to lean on him a little bit and throw in my 2 cents there. Do you remember the combo?
Ah,
It was like a long convo that was a running joke about the ranger and the warrior's relationship.
well, what is we were goofing?
Yes, pretty much, like we always do.
Yeah.
You all think we do this seriously, and
No,
really,
no,
it's
no,
just a
it's
long running joke
okay.
in how we create our stories.
Yeah. Um,
Let me see if I can
no.
pull it up really quickly.
Yeah,
I
thank you.
think the joke was I don't remember how we landed on the warrior and the ranger meeting each other, but the joke was that the ranger just never told the warrior anything. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
because she was so nomadic, and all of a sudden she shows up and has friends everywhere, and this
That's
Eldred's
that's
like,
right.
"What the flip?" Like,
The whole time he's like, he won't even say my name.
yeah,
He just calls him boy or something.
yeah. It's just like, "What? What? You have friends? What?" No. So yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to uh, Danuge's ability to be there and help save Eldred. I
Mhm.
believe that was the story. If
Yep.
it's changed, then oops. But
Hmm.
uh, shows you sometimes how being busy as a part-time writer, it's sometimes hard to keep up with things. But I think in that realization when you start to, whether it's you reading a story about the challenges of what's going on, or even just real life, when you start taking on responsibilities that seem way over your head, it's like, all right, it's time to pull in the backups. How do I figure out how to handle this? How do I get a good sense? And it perfectly makes sense that Danuge would be like, all right, well, I know I know a guy and a gal who are pretty good at taking out some of these creatures. Let's go and have a conversation. And the way I try and write my stories is there's kind of threads like that. Like when we get to the Tempest, you're going to see a thread from the story play into that. And there's just threads that come all around in these stories where slowly and surely a bunch of people whom, for the most part, there's some pieces here and there where there's interactions, but didn't really have much to do with each other, are driven by fate, fortune, and everything else to really sit down and address the evil of their day. And that's, I mean, most good stories are that. Most good stories are people living life and then thrown into the craziness of world events that are way beyond them, and what comes out. Is it heroism or is it something terrible and frightening? So I think in that same way, from the years of reading, from the years of trying to DM and do all of this stuff, it's just, that's how I think about story writing, is just how do you start connecting the dots between this disparate group of people who are forced into this situation and have to do something that's so challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, so because the Valkyrie, she's pulled in different people from different stories. And on one side of the group, we have her and her chess playing, bringing pieces together. On the other side, we have the gambler, which we've really only just briefly touched on so far because a lot of those characters haven't actually shown up yet. And so what we've seen here is the Valkyrie pulling in the druids and the ranger and the warrior, and also last week's character as well. Now I forget what it was, but because we didn't really call her out in it, Midnight. The Avenger. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
But so yeah, it's like none of these people have really asked for any of this. They've just been kind of pulled out of their daily lives and given tasks, and I guess they chose to do it because we need a plot progression.
I mean, that's the real answer.
Yeah,
That's the real
yeah.
answer.
I've always enjoyed stories where you get very unlikely groups of people together and they become something larger than themselves. And
Mhm.
yeah, recently in the past few years, I've read a good amount of Stephen King, and
Mhm.
he is very good at that. These group of typically children that are unlikely heroes, and I think we've sort of started to build that here. I mean, we have a ranger and a warrior and druids, and the guy has a wolf head, and we have an Anubis like character. We're pulling all of these people together, and I kind of like um, it always creates interesting tensions and
Mhm.
interesting twists when you get unlikely characters from totally different backgrounds together,
Yeah.
throw them in a situation and see what comes out. And that's part of what's exciting to me, is we're going to see what comes out because we are going to create what comes out. And when I say we, I mean us as a team, but also the community. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes out. So I wanted to ask about another thing about the druids, and I don't know how much background you had in your mind or set up or any of that, but we've talked about these crystals in the world of eternity that absorb the sort of power around them. And when you were writing about the druids, they clearly have the ability to work with nature, manipulate nature. In your mind, does that come from a certain source, like a crystal? Is that something that is more innate to them? Is that, sort of, where does this power come from?
Yeah, it goes back to a combo we all kind of had a while ago. where I was incessantly asking about some foundational pieces to the world of like
Yeah.
how does magic work here? And we came to an answer that was kind of, I think, a good one in the fact that it's just kind of a layer of reality that exists. Like magic is like protons. They're
Mhm.
there. They're
Mhm.
like protons and neutrons. The inherent problem with getting it to work is you need some sort of magnetism to do it. And magic in itself, when we think about it across stories, it typically it is a force, but it's a force with like a teeny tiny mind of its own. Like not much, not where it's actually sentient, but it just kind of does things in the same way the wind does things. It just goes and does as it wishes. So in that sense, my mind, it's like, okay, there are things that clearly either attune you to magic or are attract and harness it. In my mind, the ferociousness and the wildness of nature was just an attraction point where if you're up growing up around it, if you're there stooped in it, it's not hard to manipulate, but you can only manipulate it in the ways that nature works. So you can't just be like, all right, hey, I'm going to create a gigantic fireball from nature. Like, no, it doesn't
Yeah.
work that way.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
uh, it- but it does work that perhaps, perhaps being able to turn into other beasts or dwell with things among there, or even just use powers that you might find inherent that happen in the forest are much easier to learn and to do if you're stooped in that. And that was kind of my mindset of, yeah, the druids could go and grab some crystals and harness more power. There's no
Right.
doubt about it. But it's
Right.
just being there and being such a wild place to live, and magic itself kind of just it attracts to things to that, whether it's wild or whether it's focusing, it kind of
Mhm.
has a mind of its own and what it attracts to in that sense. And that's where I was like, this is how I see it working
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
um, if it's there and it's hard to attune to, it's because of all the craziness and all of the possibilities and the will that it takes. But the will that these people have to survive every day kind of is their leverage and how they can access it within the realm of nature.
Mhm.
So I was thinking that, and the other big thing that comes out is um, very much star signs are important and help. It's almost like a cast like sense for the druids. I didn't get into it there, but in their background, depending on what sign of the stars you're born onto, it kind of is a good indicator of the powers you might have. And the reason I was
Mm.
thinking that again, magic's attracted to wild, forceful things, and what more powerful, forceful things are there than the stars in the sky that give us light day and night? So all of those things were kind of swirling in the back of my head as I wrote this of, okay, if someone were to ever ask me, like, how do these people have power? Because someone's going to ask you, well, how does magic work in this way? Um, that's how I see it, is really just them having the ability through sheer will of survival and all these years being able to manipulate the power that they find in the forest and among the beasts and in the seasons that they have to endure there, and it just comes natural because it's empowered and imbued by the stars in the sky.
Interesting.
That
Well,
was a
so it's
long answer.
no, it's all good.
No,
It's
it's a good
almost
answer.
yeah. It's almost like Mother Nature is the third character, the fifth character or so in this story. Like Mother Nature is an additional character in and of itself, and the druids just interact with that character in a different way than other characters. I like it. That's really cool.
Mhm. Yeah. We always have energy transference too when
Mhm.
any kind of magic system. What's the give and take? What's the sacrifice? What are you pouring into, to create the energy, transference. And
Right.
I know we actually did see that with the crystals when we talked
Mhm.
about the necromancers. Oh, my mic's about to fall.
Oh no.
Sorry. Someone take over.
Interesting. So, you mentioned briefly during the last answer about the druid's ability to manipulate nature and turn into other creatures. So, as a part of the story, you mentioned the brother takes the form of a wolf, or at least has the head of a wolf. Do you envision him remaining that way, or maybe is that something that shifts and changes as the situation or scenario calls for it?
Yeah, I think part of how I answered it before. So again, not to be the man behind the mirror with how we talk about this, but sometimes um, creative gives us just, hey, here's the image of what we're going to do for this character, and you're just like, awesome. I now need to explain why this character exists. So we get a male and a female druid, and
Yeah.
the male druid is this wolf-like character. I'm like, awesome. I have to figure out why this character exists.
Yeah.
So in my mind, it goes back to the sign of the stars. These are twins born literally minutes apart on a day where the sign of the stars shift. Like maybe where you would have a shift between fall or spring and summer, things of that nature, where you just
Mhm.
have this relatively immediately shift. You have twins here, literal brother sister twins, where born similar powers, yet very different. So yeah, I do think Roma would be able to change into other creatures, but this is who he is. He was born this beastman-esque form that
Gotcha.
again separates him from being able to live in town, live with others, because people are very good at being terrible towards things they don't understand, and then very much in this way, like your average townsperson in any sort of fantasy person's not going to understand how magic works, because even those who do, most times it's hard to get out, right? Like I'm having to explain it in this long, convoluted way as one of the architects of the world, and it's convoluted. Like, how do you expect someone who's living day to day on a pittance of a wage, barely any access to education, to be able to explain that? You know, if you do, you have a great education system, let me tell you. Um, but so I think in that way, I don't see him. Like Roma is who he is. He is
Mhm.
unafraid of being a terrifying creature who rips apart those he finds evil.
Right.
Like there's no guile there. Like he is honest in that sense, and he's very decisive. He can be paternal and he's extremely driven, but like he is cruel when it comes to if you're across the line from him. He is not one who is interested in taking mercy, showing mercy. He's hasty, and by nature of how he was born and whom he is, he's very aggressive. So it's this interesting thing, especially with, again, we're given two pictures, like these are both druids,
Mhm.
make it work. I'm like, all right, let's make this work. So on the flip side, Aveline is much different. She's diplomatic, she's nurturing, she can be there. She can sometimes pensive and hesitant, but it's this interesting plot we see out where this arbitrary piece of here's two pictures, make them work,
Hmm.
Yeah.
allows us to weave together something that actually is like, hey, like definitely different sides of the same coin here.
Yeah.
Definitely different purposes, different reasons why they exist, different place in where they are in the structure of things, but both have purpose. I think that's the way I wrote Roma, is like, okay, it's easy to take the picture of Aveline and be like, all right, hey, it's the female druid where um, for better or worse, the group of guys who are going to want waifus are going to be very attracted to. It's not going to be like just blunt way of saying it. Like, how do you take Roma, the one that people are going to be like, oh, I got this NFT and it's not the one I wanted as the Druid. Like, how do you make that interesting?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
let's just call it as it is. Some of our people who are going to come, that's just where they're at. It's like, okay, well, we have to embrace you somehow.
Seems like between the two of them, we end up with a really nice sense of balance, which I think goes along very well with the Mother Nature, them being attuned to nature, because in nature you find a lot of balance naturally. And it's nice how you sort of brought that out in these two characters. They sort of balance each other out in a way that works. They're both seem very practical, and as you said, like survival of the fittest when it comes down to it, but they both sort of have opposite approaches to the same thing. It's nice to bring out that balance.
Yeah, no, it was, like I said, it was a different task that I found really enjoyable because depending on the story and how the person's written, you're just like, you find interest in a character or you don't. And a lot of times, I mean, I'm not going to say I'm writing anything that truly breaks the mold here with our characters, but the fact that I got to write them and got to think through some of the pieces of why they are and some of the kind of hanging storyline threads that could be told about the potential friction between the two and all of that stuff. All of it becomes way more interesting for me in terms of finding interest in a class like a druid.
Yeah.
All right. Before we continue with more questions, I just want to make a transition because we have 20 minutes left. Right now we are opening up like questions for everyone. You guys can continue asking questions, of course, but I just want to remind the chat that we have the Q&A section of the stream now. So if you have any burning questions, now's the time to get them out there in the chat so we can answer them. Of course, as usual, we may not be able to answer any and all questions, but we will do our best to get an answer or let you guys know that we can answer it if that's the case. All right. I don't know if we want to do the whitelist question now as well before we continue.
Sounds good. So as every week, we have a question. If you want to get a spot on our whitelist, just DM me the answer to the question on our Discord on Midnight 703 here. Midnight, you can find me in the Discord, DM me the answer to the question. So this week's whitelist question is, whose sword was shattered on an orc's head? So from the Druid story, whose sword was shattered on the orc's head? The whitelist will give you various benefits. It's definitely something, if you want to play Eternity, then you are going to want to get in on while you can. I think we might have a couple more announcements as time goes on about the benefits that the whitelist gets you. So, if you're interested in joining us early, definitely DM me the answer to that question. You have 24 hours from now. If you're watching this on YouTube, it is 2:43 Eastern on Sunday, April 10th. So 24 hours from now, find me in the Discord, Midnight 703, and DM me the answer, and I'll add you to the whitelist. Thank you.
All right.
Awesome. All right. We have a question in the chat. I don't know, were you guys done with the question that you asked, Midnight? Just so I don't interrupt something.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
All right, let's take the chat question here. Outside of NPC battles, are there interaction with other players in the game? So that's kind of an interesting question. And I think the answer is yes and no, kinda. Initially, there will not be, as far as I know, there will not be like multiplayer in it. but the game does support multiplayer, and it is something that the devs are looking into. But in like how it is going to be implemented in the game, I don't think is known for sure yet. But it's definitely being looked into. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the latest we have, right?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Yeah, I think. I mean, we're told to keep writing, so I'm assuming that our writing is going to be useful at some point, other than just ornamentation. So for sure, yeah. But with one of the, so you've got Final Fantasies, you've got Darkest Dungeons, and a little bit from talking with the devs, Diablo as well is kind of one of those pieces that they've appreciated. And when you think of two of those, at least, how text is utilized looks quite a bit different than your typical CRPG Baldur's Gate or whatever, where like you are immersed and you can live and die on the text that's there, literally such important things. And it's just, I don't think we're there. I don't think what we're writing here is just going to be stuffed into a wiki that's never used either, though. So it's just how we get to play it out and how does that look? Because even if you've ever messed around with games before, you get this. And if you've ever gotten the chance to build modules on something like Neverwinter Nights, you get this. But when you're setting up a simple dialogue, the amount of work that goes into just setting it up and the variables that are involved with it and all of that stuff, it takes a lot of work. So imagine doing that across multiple NPCs, multiple variables that may or may not go on, all of that stuff. It's not a short order. So I would not expect to see something of that fortitude right away. But I also am hopeful that we will have it.
Yeah. I mean, it's also just success. I mean, if, the game's successful and we're generating revenue and we can put resources to it, that's, there's the sky's kind of the limit.
Definitely. All right, we have some more questions in the chat here. What happens after reaching level 50? Just the arena playing? I don't think... I don't know how much about how the game itself is working with the leveling thing. As far as I understand, there will be kind of like if you imagine World of Warcraft, you have the different areas that have a certain level recommendation, or I don't know if it's requirement or recommendation, but you have like different areas for different levels. I think it's roughly going to be something like that. So I imagine once you reach level 50, you can still be in the high level areas and still do stuff there. I'm not sure if you'll be locked out of any quests as you level up. I don't really know. But at least I think you can still basically free roam and play the game. And I guess you can do the arena as well. Again, I'm also not entirely sure how the arena is gonna work. If that'll be at a certain point in the quests, you will unlock the arena and then you can basically go there as you please, or if it's an end game thing, or how that's gonna work.
There'll be, I think, raid style encounters too, and I know some of the there'll be some difficult NFT characters. The only way you're going to get them is by beating the high end I don't know, enemies. And so there's gonna be a reward loop that's going to be enjoyable, and to that you will want to play it until you get what it is you're trying to get. So there's a combination of grinding plus reward looting, or reward. So that's what we're looking for, is that feedback of enjoyment of getting something special.
We definitely don't want a game loop where getting your character to level 50 basically ends the game. We don't want a level 50 character to become obsolete, basically.
Yeah, although we do have 18 characters you can level to 50.
True.
Not counting the ones that aren't released yet.
Yeah. I would say that level 50 is, the level cap at launch.
Yeah, hey,
And,
there you go.
we're focusing on this island to begin with. But as we've discussed, Eternity is a whole planet, and there is much more world to be found, harder enemies to fight that reward you in different ways. There is also, for anyone that's played Diablo or, I got into the end game heavily for Diablo 3. Reaching max level is really the beginning of the
Yeah.
game. Then the rest of the game is the loot, min maxing your characters, getting better, higher rarity items. Our items have randomized rolls on them, so you can, continue to play to get that next piece of equipment that will push you to higher levels of power that will let you defeat those challenging enemies to get the unique rewards. And like Tal said, there's 18 characters. Some of them will only be, playable later on after you achieve certain things. So I would say getting to level 50, getting a party of 4 characters to level 50 is the beginning, isn't the end.
Mhm.
Certainly
Mm.
isn't the end. I won't say it'll be the beginning, but it certainly will not be the end. Um, and, if you get a character level 50 and you had a good time playing, you want to do it all over again, you can sell them. You can sell your level 50 characters, buy new ones, and start all over. You can take a common character, put it to level 50, sell it in the auction house, and buy the next rarity up, or try your chances for the next rarity up to play through again. And there's a benefit in those higher rarity characters, um, and getting the higher rarity characters. Um,
The other thing we're thinking about, so on our roadmap, there are additional features that are rolling out where we haven't said a lot about them yet because they're still in flux. But I think what we can say is you will definitely want to hold on to those level 50 characters and have more than 4 of them with one of the at least stated items that's on the roadmap, and then another one that um, I think the devs think I'm jokingly kicking around, but there's a very serious item that I would like to see us roll out if we get enough success that would not only incentivize keeping those characters, but incentivize the people who like building things in their kingdom to have a take at that. And also, it kind of is a nice little mix of PvP meets some creative crafting, meets a few other things. So there's things on the roadmap that, are there where we haven't fleshed them out, where this is going to matter. And there are things that haven't made it to the roadmap yet that we're already talking about that
Yep.
having lots of level 50 characters will help.
Yeah,
So this also leads a little bit into one of the other questions. Like the game will expand after a certain amount of players reaches that, and then the question goes into like, is lands gonna be a thing? And there's more to come. So we already kind of covered the more to come part a little bit, but actually on our roadmap we do have land, like player-owned land. I assume that's what you mean, bigger portion. And I think it's basically confirmed that there will be land at some point, but we don't have the full details of how it's going to work. But boy, have we had many interesting conversations about what to do with that part of the game. And then that will come later.
Yeah.
So definitely there will be land. I think that's confirmed. But we don't know in what way yet.
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
and
we.
go ahead,
Oh,
Mike.
go ahead, Tal. Go ahead.
I was gonna say we want you to level a character to 50 because it's fun to do, because you get good rewards to do it. And then once you get there, you have to make a tough decision, and that we're going to implement mechanisms that make you not want to sell your level 50 character. And then you have to decide, am I going to sell this or am I going to keep it? Because it could be more beneficial to keep it. You don't know. Or do you want to take the money and go get a different character? So the idea is you got to put those decisions in there to make it, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. And now I'm going to go get another one and level it again because I want to sell one, but I want to keep this one. So sorry, that's what I want to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you guys haven't figured it out yet, what the team is very interested in doing is pushing the boundaries of what has already been created. So I do want to mention there, like we said, we've had a lot of discussion about land and how land can or will be used. What I would anticipate is we will use land in a way that you have not seen before. And so, it's definitely worth hanging on to some characters. Make sure you have your, I already have favorite characters. I don't know about you guys. So I definitely know that I'll have a team of level 50 characters for those characters. And, it'll be worth hanging on to those as time goes on and as we continue to expand and put in new functionality and new aspects. We want to implement things that appeal to all different kinds of players, investors, people. So I think you'll see things that appeal to different types of investors or just people that want to get more involved in the game in different ways. We're very curious. We're very interested in bringing in people from all different investment styles, backgrounds, whether they're, gamers or whatever. We want, a place for everybody.
And even people that aren't investors, such as gamers, for example. Like, I know you can be both, but like the core gamer, I suppose, does not necessarily have to be an investor as well.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can honestly say we've had more creative ideas we've forgotten at this point than are on our roadmap. So it's more a matter of, not trying to derail the conversation too much, but we have to be cognizant in one, we're building in a unique space. Gaming in general is a unique space where we have a very peculiar set of people who are interested in games, are very vocal about when they are bad and only mildly vocal when they're good. So you have that background shifting into this. You have the fact that the system here, including NFTs, has been viewed fairly negatively because of who's tried implementing it, and that's through AAA games and how they've done it versus small independents who are trying to actually create a live economy. Entirely different situation. So you've got all of that going for us, and the size of what we're looking at for a game is very much on that smaller independent side. So we have to be very cognizant of, we can't offer you all the AAA features that you might have like right at launch, because our devs need to eat and sleep and have a life too, as much as we joke about locking them in the basement most days. They do need to have a life. They do need to have a life. And I think, it's an entirely different way of doing this because of all the complaints you hear in the gaming world from, hey, getting a game that's cost me tons of money that's not finished and things of that nature, where we're saying, here's what we're coming to you, here's what we're offering to you. Yeah, the entry cost is higher than your typical indie game for sure, but what we're offering is something that's live and moving and continuing to grow and isn't going to just stink because we want your input in it if you're actually looking to give input.
Yeah.
And I think it's also worth mentioning, like, if the cost of entry is too expensive for the amount of content that you feel is in the game, like at initial launch or even like half a year after launch or something, like you just wait until you feel like Eternity is enough content to warrant that price. And I guess that goes for any game, but like with Eternity, it's very transparent, at least I feel, compared to many other game developments, like where you get a finished game. First of all, if we were to do like complete Eternity before releasing it, we probably wouldn't have a release date right around the corner. It would probably be like, I don't know, 3 years in the future or something.
At least.
Yeah. So and also we want to involve the community, which is kind of forcing us to do it this way, because we couldn't like make a full game and then be like, this is the game, and then now we want community input to make it better, because it doesn't really work like that. The community has to be involved as early as possible, and that's what we're trying to do as well.
And on the other side, we're not selling 10 million NFTs for $100 million and then releasing the game 5 years from now. That's part of the plan. So there's a fine balance here between releasing the game, having a game that works, and also a game that's going to pay us back for playing, because the tokenomics are, I mean, second to none. I have not found one game that matches ours, and I've spent a lot of time looking. And I think we can really hang our hat on that. That's really going to push us over the edge when people really start to understand what it is that we're doing with the revenue from everybody who's playing. And that is, it's going right into the game, and it's going to the treasury and the player base. And we all win if we, are supporting not just our game, but games that support the players. I mean, support those games, Don't support the scams, that's not helping anybody. It's just encouraging bad behavior.
All right, so we are nearing the end here. I just crossed the 1 hour mark, so we will have to wind down here. So I just want to mention, because we mentioned the release date. The release date has been pushed a little bit. When was it? 16th of May? Week of 16th?
Somewhere around there.
And that was logistical purposes. We were having some discussions with our partners, and not everyone was able to meet the current release date, so we just had to push it a little bit. So I know that's not the news that people want to hear, but I suppose the earlier we can say it is better. So it's not like on the release date we're like, well, it doesn't release today anyway.
Now, is that early access or is that full release date?
I believe it was the launch, actually, right? I think, but it wouldn't release in early access, I think, is the thing.
What the issue with the partner launch is that we don't want to get ahead of them in terms of getting our people into the game with characters on the chain. So I think that's what's caused that, is that, this is a big deal for everyone involved. And so we want to make sure that, we're not getting ahead of ourselves for our partners either.
So it sounds like people have an extra week of early access to mess around with before they get an actual launch.
I
So
believe something
just we will double confirm that, but I don't think we need to sweat too much, everyone, because you're still going to be playing a lot of Eternity before the full version of it is released.
Definitely. Okay, so there was one last question that we didn't answer yet, and that is, how long do you expect it to take your party to max level, or to bring your party to max level? And I don't know if we have enough data at this point to make an educated guess on that, because many of the game systems are still being designed, and there's a lot of balance changes still to happen. But I don't think we have enough to speculate on how long it would take your party to get to max level. It could be months, years, maybe not years, I don't know. But yeah, I really don't know where to start even speculating on it. I don't know if you guys have any input on that before we end.
I think that's something we'll be able to answer better the closer to launch, after some discussion with the team. But yeah, I hope it's not years. I mean, I think it'll be it's a balance between a meaningful amount of time, and we don't want it to be instant or after a day, but we also don't want it to be too long. So there's a balance there that I think we can talk with the team about and see where they're landing with that, and get some more information later on.
And obviously it also depends on how much time you put into the game. Obviously, if you play like 12 hours a day, you will reach max level earlier than if you play 4 hours a day or 2 hours a day. So that it has to be balanced basically, because it's also like some players will play it very aggressively and some players will play it more passively, and it has to be reasonable for both of those groups, kind of. All right. Anyone have any closing comments?
I've just been answering another question that
Mhm.
kind of just the reason why we have to push the early access back is because we can't mint the NFTs because we need our partner to launch for us, and we can't like circumvent that partnership.
So early
so-
access is going to be May 16th, then not full launch.
That's the thing I'm not entirely sure about, if it is early access or if it's just like, here, play the game, you know what I mean? But I feel like if they're ready to do the Gen Zeros and the common characters at the same time, then it's probably just here's the game, play it, you know. It's really with the partnership, it just changed our timeline, and it is what it is, you know. I mean, our partners are awesome, and so we definitely want to it's worth the delay, very much
So-
worth it.
In short, we will get you a clearer answer very soon.
Yeah.
That is our promise. Today we will get you a very clear answer on it, because it looks like we're kind of scratching our heads too. This is the fun, like I said, the fun part of games is there's so many interdependencies. You're like, oh, this will work. Oh crap, this won't work. Will it work? I don't know. We'll find out.
And also, this is just the effect of working with other people as well. Like, it looks good until it doesn't, and then we have to figure out what to do about that. Like, it just happens when you're working with multiple teams. When you don't have the full control, they probably are also busy with other things. So yeah, just has to match up or add up.
Yeah,
Cool.
don't worry. If we think it's really going to push things back, we'll lock the devs back in their basement and we'll get it out there.
And the other devs as well. We'll get the devs of the partner and lock them in the same basement, and then now only focus on this.
Get to work.
Yeah. All right. Remember to follow all our socials, guys, as well before leaving the stream. And the easiest way to find all our socials is to go on Discord and find the links channel, where all the social links should be present. And you can find the Discord at discord.gg/EternityRPG. Excellent. Okay. Any final comments from any of our hosts?
Thanks for being here, Dirk.
Yeah, definitely. And nice reading and explanation. And thank you all in the chat for coming. It was very nice to see so many of you this time. So definitely hope to see you all again next week, where we will have another interesting topic. So yeah, with that, goodbye everyone, and hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you
Have a
next
good
week.
weekend.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See ya.
See ya.